So yeah, thanks Pops for allowing this time out your busy schedule, your social life and travelling scene. But really the purpose of today is to find out, as I said, the essence of Pops. So we're actually going to go through a couple of different segments throughout this interview. So starting off with growing up, kind of things like where you're born. You did, good.
Eventually.
Maturity is another thing though. School life, so where you went to school, kind of your friends, etc. The younger years, so kind of being a rebel probably, I would imagine. Your love life, so particularly obviously when you met Mum. Spirituality, no, you're not particularly a religious man, but kind of your beliefs and things like that. Parenthood, so when you first became a parent, what that was like.
Black days.
Your work life, and things, your achievements during that time. Then life in general, so things that happened that made a difference to you. And then leaving a legacy, so the things that you like to be remembered for. And then a little bit about remembrance, and particularly focusing on your mum and dad, Gramps, and my nan. In between these segments, though, there is going to be some surprises, little questions, which should be fun, lighten the mood. So yeah, you'll be experiencing a few things during the course of the interview. So shall we get started?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to kick off with growing up. So some of these questions might be quick, some might be long. Hopefully we'll keep it nice and neat and tidy in the terms of the interview style. So yeah, where were you born?
I'm a Brummie. I was born in Birmingham in the UK during the war, and which is why I'm 80. And my auntie was giving birth to my cousin in Birmingham, and a V1 rocket hit the nursing home in Croydon the day before I was due in. So my mother got on a train to go to Birmingham to be with my auntie. Unfortunately, my auntie's baby was stillborn, so I was always her child from there on in. The train got strafed by an ME 109, so everybody got under the seats except my mum, because I was a very big baby. I was 10.5 pounds, born, packed and ready for school, as somebody said. And so I got born in Birmingham. I can't say I'm an honest Brummie, but I have supported Aston Villa occasionally. And then we moved back to South London. I was looking up the other day on the internet about the fact that this V1 rocket had wiped out the maternity home. So I was a smidgen away from an early death, as it were. When we were, I think one has to remember that after the war, after the excitement of VE Day and VJ Day and all the other things, Britain was in a mess. You know, I mean, that's why Churchill was voted out. It's gone socialist. And for food, people were still on rations until 1953. I remember our first visit back to the UK in 1953, we had to get ration books to get butter and cheese and that sort of stuff. So it was a rough time. And my dad had a teaching job in North London at Highgate School. And he had to commute from South London by, 2 trains and a tube. And life was not good. We had a little house in Croydon. But life was not good. And Dad thought he needed to get away, as people did in those days, to get off to the colonies. And he wanted to go to New Zealand because he had cousins there. So he went to there's an organisation called the Private School Headmasters Association or something in London for the Commonwealth. And he went there to try and see if he could get a job as a science teacher in New Zealand. And they said, well, we've got a headmaster here from a school in South Africa called St Andrews College, which is a preeminent school there. It's over 100 years old. And the headmaster's here, and he's a very impressive person. So my dad met the headmaster of the school, and then that led to history of us moving to South Africa. My earliest memory of my childhood was that they told me age 2.5 or 3 that we were moving to South Africa. Not that it meant a lot to me in those days, but I couldn't pronounce South Africa. I only said Sakarakara. And I can remember my parents, who were dearly loved, waking me up in the middle of the night when they had a bridge fall or something, to shake me and say, "Where are you going, Andrew?" And I would say, "Sakarakara." And they would all laugh like drains. So that's my earliest memory of anything to do with life. So that's how I got born in Birmingham, and my life really, if you look at my life in general, that there are two major things that we'll talk about later. The one was the move to South Africa, because you can complain about apartheid and all those sort of things, but I was raised in South Africa when it was safe, it was secure, it was a wonderful life. I roamed the mountains, I collected all things that are very much infradigna, like I collected birds' eggs and rare birds, and had a butterfly collection, and I was always up in the hills and the mountains. There was no TV, there was nothing. I had a wonderful existence. So that was the one thing. The second thing we'll come back to later was getting an American Field Service Scholarship to America. Those two things have created my life, you know, and more than anything else. So that's my early childhood. That's how I was born.
Okay. And then tell me a memory about your sister, Auntie Angela.
Well, she was a tad older than me. Only a tad, but she was older than me. And she lived through the war more than I did. She used to sleep in a drawer under the dining room table because of the Blitz and things like that. But she was always very close to me, and always has been close to me, and is still very close to me. Unfortunately, she lives in America now and is recently widowed. But she's a fantastic, bright, sparky person. My again memories of her first romance in life was me having to ride my bicycle to pass messages on to her boyfriend, who was at school down the road and things like that. But she's a wonderful people person, unlike me, who's obviously very introverted, and all those things go with it. But she's wonderful, still a very big thing in my life, and we'll hope to see her this autumn too, because she's not able to travel at the moment to come to my birthday.
Yeah. So then also, who was your best friend when you were young, very small?
Well, again, come back to roaming the forest around Grahamstown, where we lived in South Africa. I had two friends, David Bromhead, who became Brigadier General in the Army in the UK and was in fact equerry to Prince Charles for a while. And a guy called Derek Sheriffs, who moved off New Zealand later on. And Victor, somebody or other, I can't remember his name, I hope he's not watching. And we roamed the hills together and did things together. I spoke to David Bromhead at an old school function the other day, and I said to him, you know, I can't remember what happened to our rare egg collection. And he said, it's in my loft, and I daren't ever bring it out, because if people knew that the equerry to Prince Charles had an egg collection of rare eggs in his youth, that would be very much. But those are the things in those days. You did things, hunting, shooting, and fishing in those days, things that are very much not frowned on these days. So they were the sort of consistent friends I had. And then when I went to prep school, I had a friend called Tony Mullins, who became my lifelong friend. Unfortunately, he was a very great orthopedic surgeon, but he died of a brain tumour not so long ago, and we've kept very close to his family. There's one thing, again, that you gain in South Africa which you don't get anywhere else, and that's what I call the extended family. Those people that we went as kids on holiday to the coast or resorts or Fish River Mouth or all those sort of places, they've now grown up, and their kids have been to the same places, and we've all had holidays, shared holidays together, and then their kids have had kids, and nearly all those kids have come to our house here in South Africa or travel on here in England and travel on our boat. And it's an extended family. They're as good as members of our family. And so those friends stayed with me forever. Tony Mullins went to prep school, senior school. We played in the first team together. Everything was. We never had a crossword ever. And his wife and his two sister-in-laws, have been joined at the hip ever since.
Then, also, who was your favourite relatives outside the ones we've been talking about at the time when you were growing up?
I think my Auntie Millie, the one who gave birth to a stillborn child, and I wouldn't say she was a wild thing, and I wouldn't say that she necessarily had popularity among the rest of the family, but she had a bond with me, which she had all her life, and we were with her almost when she died. And she was wild. I mean, she married originally some Russian count, ran off from home at 17, and then she married a bookmaker who became my in UK. I remember won £100,000 on the Randolph Turpin fight in God knows when, and he was a very rich man, and he sent me new golf clubs and things like that. I only met him once at the hotel in London, when he was then ensconced with a 25-year-old Japanese girl. So he was obviously, and he and Millie were wild in everything they did, whether it was drinking, driving, or anything else. So yes, I had a strong relationship with her. She married a person in the school. She moved out to South Africa as well and followed us out there. And she had with her husband, a wonderful shack down the Fish River, and it was a shack, but we spent all our Christmases, and it was a fantastic time running on the beach and doing all those things. Again, I repeat that a significant part of my life was set by my childhood in South Africa. Now, you can say it's like looking back at the slave trade. You can say it was terrible to be happy in an apartheid-ridden country, but we were happy, and we had a fantastic time. And remember, my father was a schoolmaster. He stayed in that school for nearly 40 years. He was the Mr. Chips of the school. Everybody loved him. And it was a wonderful life in every possible way. And the school had 12 full-size playing pitches, 18 tennis courts, 8 squash courts, 2 swimming pools. And in the summer holidays, that was mine. You know, I could play anything, play golf on the low field, all those things. So it was just, my childhood was fantastic.
Great. So that kind of actually sums up the growing up stage. But actually got a question for you, and it comes from Delph. So Delph actually wanted to ask if you remember batting against him in the garage door on 37 Lochner Street when he was a 14-year-old quickie bowler, if you remember that time.
I think you must go back to the fact that meeting Mum meant meeting her family, and I was so anxious to impress Mum that I loved her and I wanted to court her in a proper way, that I ended up bowling endlessly to Delph against the bloody garage door, and occasionally having to receive a wickedly fast ball from him, hour after hour. And I don't think he's ever properly repaid me for those efforts in order to make sure that I was sweet and happy with Cerise. Delph and I have been very close. Let's just go back to Mum's family, because it's important that we understand. Mum lost her mother very young. We're never quite sure of the brain embolism or something, but she lost her, and that was a massive thing because Mum and her mother Sybil were incredibly close. I mean, they did everything together, they baked together, did things together. And her father, being a Norwegian, not easy to show his emotions, wasn't able, I think, to be a support. Her friend Lizzie was a big support at that time. Her father, Eric, set out to find a substitute to look after his 2 children. And he married a divorcee called Pixie who was unbelievably wonderful person. So that in that respect, it's a wonderful story. But she had 2 children. And so they suddenly, Cerise was sharing a room with another girl her age, and her brother was sharing a room with a boy much younger than him in their quite small house with 1 bathroom. We used to be rapid in those days. And somehow it worked. somehow it worked. And so they then went on to have 2 children together. So there were 6 children, yours, mine, and ours. And the secret of this whole thing, or the miracle of it, is that none of those 6 siblings, and we have a WhatsApp group called the Siblings, none of those siblings would ever introduce anybody as my half sister, my half brother, or step brother, or anything like that. It's always been 6 family, and we're still as close as you'll ever be as a group. So that's how I ended up trying to keep with that family and bowling to Delph for hours. And then Delph and I share a huge love of sport, which is where we're still very close and communicate on a regular basis. And just so that spring people's memories, that Delph played for Somerset Strand in the amateur days of rugby. And he had the biggest boot ever out of hand. I mean, he could boot the ball all over the field. And I think in today's professional life, he'd probably turned professional and gone on. I also had a big boot. So I used to kick the ball over the halfway line time after time in my youth, because I had 12 playing pitches and 12 sets of rugby poles to kick at. Now, Delph and I are still very close, as we are with the whole family.